and you will be berated if you let down your teammates. You will even be bullied, okay? Call it toxic masculinity, whatever you want to call it. It just is, because when people rely on you and there are deadlines to be made, you either have to produce or you're fucking done.
What's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tight at Alpra.
Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome to the Everyday Jiu Jitsu podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kwan. The Everyday Jiu Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu Jitsu. Of course, we now have a new name that was explained in the previous episode why we had to make a name change. And today we're going to be discussing something very, very different. And that's what I like to give to you on this show. It's not always going to be about Jiu Jitsu. Sometimes we talk about things like politics and religion and all types of things. Today, I'm going to discuss something that I know very well, and that's the culinary arts, how you can improve your culinary abilities just by listening to this episode. Basically, I'm going to give you 10 tips that can really help you become a better cook basically right away. And before I do that, I'd like to remind you to please like, share, and subscribe, comment if you can, wherever you're listening to this podcast. If the podcast isn't showing up where you live, I know right now it's being blocked in the States. I am working to relaunch everything, so it should be available again, hopefully in the next couple weeks, if it's not already. But I would like to continue the show, and the show must go on, as we know. So that being said, let's get started. How can you improve becoming a better chef or a better cook? And what is the difference between a chef and a cook? People started calling me a chef, just people who would work in dish pits and, servers and things like that. And I always said, there's only one chef in the kitchen. The chef to me is somebody who actually runs the kitchen, whereas I will always just be a cook, right? Some people believe the words are synonymous, but I think that being a good cook, that always came first for me. And when I was a kid, I really did want to be a really high level chef, a professional chef, a chef of a hotel or a cruise ship. I had visions of working around the world as a chef, traveling. And when you find someone that you want to start a family with, those things sometimes can be put by the wayside. And it's easy to kind of get caught up in that life that the culinary arts can give you, especially if you're working evenings and things like that, partying, getting into drugs and alcohol and things like that. And luckily for me, I was always working in the daytime. And anyone who knows my story knows that when I was a purple belt, I sort of realized that I didn't want to do culinary arts anymore. I wanted to get into jiu-jitsu and make that my profession. And the way that I did that was I just kept training, and they said, "Hey, Matt, you want to move up the ladder at the kitchen and move higher into more of a managerial position?" And I said, well, if this happens, what is this going to do to my schedule? How is this going to reflect my jiu-jitsu study? And they said, yeah, basically you're going to have to sacrifice your daytime in the kitchen. You're going to be working evenings and potentially even working longer hours. And that's kind of the trap of becoming a manager in some of these kitchen positions, is that you're going to sacrifice a lot of freedom and a lot of time during the day. And so I decided, you know what? I think I'm just going to stick with this position. I was a first cook at the time, which is still a pretty high level in the kitchen. And that would allow me to pursue jiu-jitsu, to train every evening, and to eventually get my business started, which I did around the brown belt. The day that I got my brown belt, I started my gym. And a couple of years after that is when I fully quit cooking. So I just fell in love with jiu-jitsu so much. I enjoyed teaching jiu-jitsu so much that it literally killed my culinary career. I just couldn't stick with it. But now that I look back, it's the best thing I ever did, because the culinary career, as you get older, is not very forgiving. The hours that you have to work, the stress. If you want to be a healthy, active person, it's very difficult to balance all these things when you're the chef of a kitchen. And a lot of the time you could be working 12, 14-hour days. And I looked ahead and I just said, this isn't a career for me. That being said, I was always someone who believed that, being a good cook was the best cook that I could be was kind of my priority. And maybe I didn't play the game enough from a managerial standpoint to move up in the way that I wanted to. In fact, there were bridges that were burned in my last couple of years of professional cooking just because of the things that I believed in. And maybe that's a story for another day. But I always believe that, work hard in the kitchen, develop your skills, try to be the best, and good things will happen to you. And this is sort of how I approach my jiu-jitsu career as well. And so I'd like to share with you these 10 tips that I believe can really help you accelerate your abilities in the kitchen. Okay, so let's look at number 10. Number 10 has to do with knife skills. Okay. Having good knife skills is an incredibly important skill for any cook. You're basically useless if you can't use a knife in the kitchen. And thinking about all those days that I used a knife, it's amazing that I didn't get injured more. It's actually a very dangerous skill, when you're using your knife, probably a straight 6 hours a day at least out of the 8 hours you're there. There's so many opportunities to fucking hurt yourself. But anyways, let's just start with a couple points. First of all, buy good knives. Don't go to IKEA or Walmart and buy these knives that are like $20, okay? Really, with knives, you are going to get what you pay for. But that being said, you can definitely spend way too much money on knives. It's kind of like a gi, right? You buy a gi, sometimes you get what you pay for. Sometimes you can get quite a bit for a very low amount, but you could also spend $1,000 on a gi. Sometimes, you get some of these fancy Shoyoroll limited edition gis. There's nothing really remarkable about it. That being said, they're well made, but you're going to be spending a shitload of money. So I'm going to show you the first knife that I ever bought in my culinary journey. In my year 1 of my culinary arts apprenticeship, this was the knife that they recommended I get. And this is just a standard Victorinox chef knife. You can even see my initials right here. We all engraved our knives on day 1. And the Victorinox knife is, this is still a knife that I have today. For those of you just listening, I'm holding up a chef's knife right now. And I believe this is an 8-inch chef's knife. It's a standard issue. The Victorinox is very, very high quality, even though it is very, very inexpensive. This knife, I believe, is probably around $70, $80. A couple characteristics of the Victorinox steel: very, very soft steel, so it's easy to sharpen. That being said, it will not hold its edge for as long as some of the higher quality steel knives that you can see. But for an entry level chef, and even for the professional chef using their knife, every single day, this is the one that I recommend to people. Very, very easy to sharpen, very reliable. Love my Victorinox knife. I have Victorinox slicer, serrated edge. Their serrated knife's amazing. And I would say the Victorinox is one of the best brands out there. It's definitely the best bang for your buck. Okay. I also want to show you this one. This is my this one's also very old. This is a Wüsthof. This one, it became the one that I would use every day, and my Victorinox became my backup. This is a Wüsthof Classic, German steel, a little bit harder to sharpen. The steel's a little bit harder, but it holds an edge longer. The Wüsthof series is probably my favorite. Some people like Henkel's, which is very similar to a Wüsthof, although I would argue that Wüsthof is a higher grade. It's a higher quality knife. And of course, there's going to be some Japanese brands out there like Shun, and I don't even know some of the other ones. Shun is the main one. Guys, I've seen so many Japanese knives break that I never went ahead and bought a Japanese knife. It's just the tips kept breaking off of all of my friends' knives. Yes, they look beautiful. I would even be afraid to use a Shun unless I was maybe, I don't know, making sushi or doing something more delicate. But Shun is not a knife that I would recommend. Also, I recommend you pick a knife that feels comfortable in your hand. I remember seeing some of my friends who had Global knives, which are like, I actually don't have any. They're kind of like stainless steel all the way through. They look really sharp, and they're known for being used in professional kitchens around the world. But that being said, whenever I'd pick up a Global knife, it would just feel like shit in my hands, and I didn't really enjoy the feel of it. So make sure that you pick a knife that is high quality, one that you predict yourself using for 10 years at least, and take care of your knives. Really make sure that you're taking care of your knives and invest in a good set of knives. Keep your knives sharp. One thing we say in culinary arts is, a dangerous knife is a dull knife, because a knife that is not sharp will take more effort to slice things, and then it opens up more opportunities to hurt yourself. So always keep your knives sharp. Make sure that you keep them honed on a regular basis. So whenever you see a chef, they're doing something like this and they have their knives and they're going, what are they really doing? Well, they're not sharpening their knife. They're just taking the edge, and they're essentially making the edge go side to side until they can kind of hone it into a straight point. If you don't do this on a regular basis, what will happen is every time you cut something, like a root vegetable or something tough, your edge is going to start getting these little micro bends in it that will that will start to feel like a dull knife. Okay, so we would just hone our knives every day. It doesn't necessarily sharpen your knife, but it does make it easier to cut through things. Every couple of months, or maybe depending on your knife or depending on how hard you are on your knives, you might need to add a new edge using a whetstone, and then you can hone it every day. So make sure you keep your knives sharp. And lastly, for knives, make sure you build good knife skills. I'll just talk about some techniques here. Probably the main one you see for those who are just listening, you're not going to be able to see what I'm doing. But if you hold something like this, if you're cutting something and your thumb is sticking out, you're now in risk of cutting the tip of your thumb off. I would always see people cut like this. Okay, again, for those listening, you can't see it, but this is going to result in you cutting your fingertips. And I've seen it happen many times. I've done it many times. Really what you want is to create like a claw, almost like a wall, and then take your thumb and tuck it behind that wall. This is the best way to hold something as you cut, okay? However you're going to cut. When we do cut, we kind of use like a piston movement where we're creating a circle with the cutting hand. And the way that I was first described how to hide my thumb is, think of your thumb as the quarterback and your fingers are your linemen. And you want to hide your quarterback. You want to protect your quarterback by putting it behind until this becomes second nature. You'll always see, recreational cooks with their fingertips out like this when they hold something. This is wrong. This is definitely going to be a good way to cut the tips of your fingers off or cut your nails off. So make sure that you're really practicing good knife skills. It's just like anything in jiu-jitsu. We want to focus on kind of building the best technique possible until it becomes second nature. Don't settle for knife skills that are lacking. Always think, how can I make better knife skills? And choose the right knife for the right job. That's another great piece of advice that I have for any cooks out there. Sometimes you try and cut something with a straight edge like this, like a loaf of bread, and it's going to be a real issue. And then you switch to a serrated edge and it just cuts right through. Okay, so make sure that you pick the right knife for the right job. All right, let's talk about mise en place. So mise en place is a French term and essentially means everything in place. So this is number 9, mise en place. Before you cook anything, make sure that you have everything planned out. That means your method, the way you're going to put things together, all of your ingredients, all prepped, all the equipment that you're going to need. This is your mise, okay? We always used to say in the culinary world, don't touch my mise, okay? Because cooks become very, very territorial over their mise en place. If somebody preps something and then, somebody needs it in a pinch and they come to your station and steal something off of your station, that's one of the worst things you can do to somebody in the culinary arts. You're going to get your fucking ass kicked if you do that. So your physical prep, your ingredients, the methods, even your timelines. We're going to talk about organization in a moment here, but those should all be predetermined and sort of planned nicely. Nice, neat, organized piles, individual containers, even. Everyone does their mise different ways. Labeled properly. These are all things that are super, super important. Okay, let's talk about time management, which I have put under the mise en place banner. Time management just means, it's pretty straightforward. How are you going to manage your time in the kitchen? And really, this is what separates, I think, good cooks from like excellent cooks, okay? Excellent cooks know how to manage their time in such a way that they are just incredibly efficient down to the second. You always see when a new cook comes into the kitchen, you see the methods that they use, you see the way that they use their time, and you can make pretty fair judgment as to how effective they will be. Just so you know, in professional kitchens, when you're new to a kitchen and you come in, everyone is watching you. Everyone is thinking, should we judge this new guy based on how he works, or is he one of us? And for those of you who think that this is toxic behavior or unfair or bullying or whatever, you were not meant for a kitchen. Basically, being on a kitchen brigade is a very rough, unforgiving profession, and you either have to be competent or you're a cunt. You're fucking out of here. And that's just the truth, okay? And you will be berated if you let down your teammates. You will even be bullied, okay? Call it toxic masculinity, whatever you want to call it. It just is, because when people rely on you and there are deadlines to be made, you either have to produce or you're fucking done. So make sure when you're planning out your day or your party, we'll call it. Let's say I have to cook a dinner. Okay, we'll just call that our party. We have to plan that party out to the most minute details. We really have to think about what can go wrong. That could be the numbers increasing, more people showing up, allergies. It could be equipment breaking down. These are all things that can go wrong, and what can go wrong will go wrong. Okay. It's like Murphy's Law, right? It's the little things that can happen and can fuck up your day. Expect them to happen and have contingency plans for those things fucking up. Okay. Especially in a professional kitchen. Make sure that you create these little pockets of time so that you can do other tasks. So let's say, okay, my job is to make 3 sauces and a soup for tonight's party, and I'm also in charge of all the garnishes. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to make all my garnishes first. I'm going to get my soup going. I'm going to get, my sauces going at the most basic levels, because they're going to take more time. Once those sauces are on, there's going to be a cooking time that's needed to break down certain ingredients and create certain flavor profiles. That's going to take time. Those are the pockets of time that I can go in and start prepping my garnishes. It would just be like, okay, do we want to blanch the vegetables first, or should I put my roast in the oven first, right? At what point should I put my potatoes in? Probably pretty early, because potatoes hold under hot heat. You don't want to be cooking green vegetables before you start cooking your potatoes. So this is all things that need to be planned beforehand with like a timeline. And creating these little pockets of time is a really useful way to maximize your time. The best cooks really are good at multitasking. So they'll be setting up, they might be doing 5 or 6 or 7 tasks all at once and sort of running around and getting to them all at the same time. Okay. That being said, we don't want to be running around like a fucking chicken with our head cut off. We want to make sure that we're minimizing the number of times that a job must be done. So let's say I need chopped garlic. I need it for a tomato sauce, but I also need it for a couple of other items too. It makes no sense for me to chop the garlic, start cooking my tomato sauce, and then have to chop garlic again. Do it all at once, okay? Plan how much you will need of each ingredient overall, plan it all, and then divide it into different mise en place. And then that way you're only doing that job once. Also, I think a really important thing that I was taught when I first started doing my apprenticeship at the Westin Bayshore, Vancouver, was minimize the amount of trips that you make to the fridge. In certain kitchens, this will be very significant. In other kitchens, not so significant. What do I mean? In kitchens that are so tiny, I've worked in a kitchen before that was kind of like a phone booth, super small. It didn't really matter how many trips you made to the fridge because the fridge is right there. But at the Westin, we're doing banquets for like 2,000-3,000 people. Sometimes needing to grab something from the fridge means taking a 10-minute walk. So having a cart and figuring out what you're going to need all at once and bringing everything out at once so that you can do multiple tasks really will save you travel time. It will make you more efficient. And don't think that shit doesn't go unnoticed by your bosses and your peers. Very, very important that people see you as a competent, efficient person. And just building habits like this really pay off even for the home cook who's trying to orchestrate a dinner party for 10 of their friends. This is going to be a really great way that you can put things on and have your time working for you so that you can actually enjoy the party. You can go out and socialize with your friends while your dinner is cooking. The worst thing is when you have people over for dinner and you're not around at all. And they're sort of like, where the fuck did Matt go? Oh, well, he's in the juice in the kitchen and he's trying to dig himself out of a hole because he didn't prep properly. He didn't plan his prep. And now, he's not even enjoying the party that he invited you over. So this is stuff that we want to avoid, and we just want to have good time management. One more thing I'll say about mise en place with dinner parties, making sure that what can be done the day or 2 days ahead of time is done. Things like cutting potatoes, having them in water, prepping your sauces, having your meat and your protein situated, having certain dressings or whatever, little things that can be done and that hold well over the next couple days. There's no reason why those things can't be done ahead of time so that at the party there's less to do and you can kind of just look like you're the boss. You can kind of look like you're so efficient that, hey, I'm about to do a 3-course dinner for 10 people, but I'm still out here, rubbing elbows and having a drink with you guys. That's very, very impressive from a guest point of view. Okay, let's talk about temperature management. So this is a lot to do with, clean working conditions for sure, but just keeping foods safe. Okay, we got to think about food storage and how to keep food safe so that we're not fucking poisoning our guests. So food storage, there's something called the danger zone. And the danger zone is kind of the area, the danger zone is a temperature range between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. This is kind of like lukewarm to warm, hottish temperatures. Also for you Canadians and you Europeans, this would be 4.4 degrees Celsius and 60 degrees Celsius within this range. This is the range in which bacteria can rapidly grow and really create pathogens. Pathogens are bacteria that can harm you, food poisoning, salmonella, things like this. So we want to minimize the amount of time that we keep food in the danger zone. This is incredibly important. So as soon as I cook a sauce or a soup, I want to think about if it's for another time, what is the quickest way that I can cool something like this down. A lot of the time, some people will use these ice wands, which is basically like a big wand full of frozen water, a giant ice cube essentially, and you put it in the soup and even have the soup in a pot in a body of cool running water, or even better, an ice bath that brings the said liquid down to temperature as quick as possible. Okay, I actually use a sink and I fill it with ice packs, and I just keep it stirring, and I can't even remember what it is now. It's been so long, but essentially I try and get it down to temperature within the hour, because I believe every 20 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, every 20 minutes that a food item is within the danger zone, that potentially allows the bacteria to double. Okay, so the longer that food is left in the danger zone, the more chance of pathogens. Okay, so just having good temperature etiquette with our foods when it comes to storage and cooking, cooling down items. We don't want to have leftovers sitting on the counter for 5 hours before we finally decide to put them away. Will it make you sick every time? No. In fact, it's quite rare, but it just increases the chances of pathogens. Okay. All right, let's talk about actual cooking temperatures. So temperature management from a safety, health perspective, but also now from the quality of food perspective. So cooking temperatures are very, very important. We have something called carryover cooking. So just think of it this way, the way that I was taught to cook eggs. If eggs look cooked in a pan, the chances are that the eggs will be overcooked once transferred to the plate. Hot food continues to cook after you take it off the heat. All right. And this is very, very important to understand. When you, if you cook meat, for example, and you take it out of the oven, the meat will continue to cook a little bit more. Okay. And we have to account for this. We also have to account for things like rest times, because nothing's worse than taking a roast out of the oven and you start cutting it right away, and now the meat is all tense and all the juices start running out. Things like meats, we need to let relax and sort of come back and rest after being hit with such high heats. Certain foods, certain meats don't need this. So we don't usually rest fish, fried foods, things like that, unless they're like beef or chicken. We don't usually rest things like this. Okay. So always think like when you're planning out your parties and whatnot, that your food items, you're really thinking about things like carryover cooking, rest times, and cooking temperatures. So if I'm cooking something in a pan, I need to have I need to be able to look at the pan and look at what's going on and ask myself, do I need to reduce temperatures right now? Or is this high heat still good to go with? Managing, especially when you're sauteing in a pan, managing temperatures and being able to adjust them when needed is really, really important. If I have a pan on the stove and it's piping hot and it's looking good right now, and I need to go walk away for 2 minutes, this is a great opportunity for me to ruin whatever I'm doing in the fucking pan. And what this is going to result in is I got to throw it away and start again, which is going to create a whole nother process of prepping the items and getting the food started again. So we want to minimize the amount of times that we need to restart things just because we made careless mistakes, like not paying attention to temperatures. There's so many examples of should temperatures be high or low. It depends what we're cooking. It depends if we're grilling or sauteing or deep frying. There's times when we would want to deep fry at a lower temperature to par blanch French fries, for example. But then there's times when we need to get crispy fried foods and we want to have that oil up at a high temperature. It all depends, but making sure that your temperature is at the right temperature for whatever food you're going to make, that is real. It can really be the difference between a mistake and perfect cooking. So we always want to make sure that we're managing our cooking temperatures. And also pay attention to how ingredients react with each other and to the environment. For example, if I cut potatoes and I just put them into a container and put them in the fridge, they're going to oxidize. They're going to turn brown. make sure that you're storing cut potatoes in water. And I would even go so far as to say cover them with a paper towel or a cloth so that the top layer of the potatoes can't, so that they stay submerged in water and they don't oxidize. Make sure things like tomatoes, for example, you cut tomatoes and leave them in metal containers. Sometimes that can react with the tomatoes as well. So each ingredients have their own characteristics with how they like to react with the environment. And it's important as a cook that you take note of these little nuances when working with each ingredient. Okay, let's talk about FIFO, number 7. FIFO is it's an acronym for first in, first out. Okay, this has to do with storage rotation. And one of the most common things I see from home cooks is they lack storage rotation. They kind of will let things go moldy in their fridge. They will let things fester in the back of their fridge and totally forget about them. And, they're in there for weeks at a time, even when they're totally not usable, instead of just throwing them out, which is what they should do. So what does first in, first out mean? Basically, it means that the oldest food should be used up as soon as possible. So if you just got a bunch of fresh food in, it might look better than food that's been sitting in the back of the fridge. But if the food in the back of the fridge is still usable, you should still utilize that first. Okay, first food that comes in, that's going to be the first food that you send out, because otherwise you're going to be throwing out a shitload of product. And this is basically characteristics of bad kitchen management, and it's going to lead to losing a lot of money. Food is very, very expensive, as we all know, especially nowadays. Good storage practices, really making sure that you kind of keep track of your stock. Whenever you need something, you have a little list. Hey, we're running low on salt, we're running low on tomatoes, blah, 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 etc. So just taking ownership and responsibility of your food storage practices. Also, the hierarchy of food. So let's say I'm storing food in a cooler. There's kind of an optimal way that we want to do it from a health perspective. Or a food safe perspective. I want to have raw foods on the bottom. I want to have ready to eat foods on top, if that makes sense. So things like salads, salad dressings, cold cuts, cheeses, these should be on the top. Things like raw meats and fish, and especially raw chicken, at the bottom. You don't want to have raw chicken, which needs to be cooked, over something that's ready to eat. Okay. And if you do this in the culinary world, you're going to get the shit kicked out of you, definitely, because it just increases chances of somebody getting sick, which is something we always want to avoid. And last thing I'll say is just, if in doubt, throw it out. Like I said, don't let something mold in your fridge, for weeks at a time. Get a sense of when something is no longer usable, and when it's no longer usable, get rid of it, because it's taking up space and it's potentially going to add, could leak onto other items. Make sure that you're storing your food in such a way that it's protected from the air and that it's not going to drip on something. One thing that's really important, like we were talking about, learning how different items react and interact with the environment. If I look at, let's say, some cream or butter or cheese, whatever, I need to be able to look at it and smell it and know if it's still good and it can be used, or if it needs to be discarded. This is a very important skill that every cook must have. So if in doubt, throw it out. Okay, number 6, insist on quality ingredients. And this is a very, very important one. Try to get quality ingredients. Try not to settle for ingredients that are, just cheaper or more convenient or hyper processed. This is just my advice. I know not everyone out there is in a position where they can afford the most high quality ingredients. I get that. It's an economic thing. But in my opinion, what is more important to spend your money on? High quality food, to me, is pretty high up on my list. Okay. So for me, I always try to insist on high quality ingredients. I get my beef and my raw dairy from different sources, and I trust these sources. I don't just go to anywhere to get my beef. I don't like to go to, Superstore or a random store that sells meat. I like to go to a place that I know the meat is going to be quality. I get grass-fed beef. As you guys know about my autoimmune episode, I really prioritize these high-quality foods. And you can do this too. If you find a store that has a certain product that you really like, you've sourced that product out. Very, very important that you sort of build a relationship with that person, like a butcher or, like I said, a meat dealer, or, it could be anything, a fishmonger. It's important to build those relationships and sort of see when the good stuff is coming in, assuming you can afford it. it's important also when you're shopping for these foods to be able to look at these foods and decide if the food is good enough to purchase, especially when you're picking up produce and proteins. If you're looking at produce and you have no idea what you're looking at or what to look for when you're getting certain ingredients, I mean, it's just going to be all up in the air, right? Try to think about what is a good pineapple look like, good bananas, things like this. If you're going to get meat, when did this meat come in? If you're going to get fish, especially because fish can go bad so quickly, when did this fish come in? Talk to your fishmonger and ask them these things so that you get the best possible quality products, because that really will reflect in the food that you make. And like I mentioned earlier, if you can, avoid ultra processed food, right? Okay. This one's really, really important. This skill, this is number 5, cook without a recipe. This is such an important thing that can make you such a good cook, okay? Don't be afraid to fail when you cook something, and don't think that recipes are the end-all be-all, okay? The recipes are they're just formulas that somebody has figured out worked for them, but that doesn't mean that they can't be improved upon. I think that recipes are just kind of interpretations of foods. I like recipes to look at. If, let's say, I was going to build, a curry, and I wanted to make a curry from Thailand, what I would probably do is cross-reference a couple of recipes on Google and see what are the ingredients and the methods that are common between these, because that will kind of give me an idea as to what the traditional method of this curry would be. Then I'll just make it myself, okay? Then I'll just figure out what ingredients I have and how I can utilize them, and then I'll just go to town. But don't think that, you need to be measuring things like salt in a sauce or a soup. Things like salt and pepper and, acid and sugars, these things are definitely up to your own interpretation, okay? Now, try to think about recipes as ratios, really is what they are. They're kind of just formulas. Like if I was going to make a soup, for example, every soup is usually going to have like a fat that you're going to saute certain vegetables in. So they're going to have a fat that you're going to cook in. They're going to have vegetables. They're going to have a liquid, obviously. And quite often they'll have a protein and some kind of a garnish. So I know that most soups have this formula. Then it's just a matter of finding out the ratios for this soup. Do I want my soup more watery? Do I want my soup to be more hearty? Pay attention to these ratios and how they can affect a certain dish, okay? Really, when you start looking at recipes as ratios, it becomes very easy to just make recipes your own. And like I said, just cross-reference these recipes, and that will give you an idea as to the amounts that you need. And then when you think about things as ratios, you could be like, you don't even just start measuring things anymore. You can just be like, okay, this recipe calls for 3 liters of liquid and, I don't know, 2 carrots. And then you look at a pile of 2 chopped up carrots, and you should be looking at that pile and thinking, okay, this much carrot for this much liquid. Roughly, you have an idea as to how much you should put in. What I can't stand is people who cut up carrots and then they put it in a measuring cup, or they weigh the carrots, right? This is maybe if you're going to be working in a restaurant that wants extreme streamlined recipes. When you're cooking at home, this is kind of a waste of time, okay? Really think about, how much carrot you would have for this much liquid, how much salt you'll need for this much liquid, if you're going to make a soup, how much garnish you will need for this much soup. Once you start thinking in ratios, you start to really be able to cook without recipes. So cooking without a recipe, very, very important. And also learn the basics. So there's reasons why there's certain classical dishes that come up time and time again. Try to learn what these are, okay? Even just something like a simple tomato sauce or something like a simple curry, a pot roast, or even just a roast chicken. Like, these are classic dishes that are super easy to make, and it's important to learn them so that you can sort of freestyle and make different dishes using similar techniques. I always was a huge fan of classical cooking, especially French cooking. That was kind of French and Italian cooking was kind of the type of foods that I like to do most. Being from Vancouver, it's kind of a melting pot of culture here. So it's very common that most places you'll work in Vancouver, unless it's like a specific Italian restaurant, Indian restaurant, there's going to be a mixture of different cultures on one menu. There's going to be a curry, there's going to be a pasta, there's going to be burgers, there's going to be sometimes sushi, right? And I think it's important to understand how to do one of each. It's important to kind of learn different cuisines. It doesn't mean you have to be a master in each cuisine, but if you know how to make and balance, we're going to talk about balancing a palate later. When you're making and balancing a curry or a soup or a sauce, that if you understand the ratios and the method that went into that, it's easy now to make a different variation of a curry just using that formula. Okay. And the more you do it, the more you play with it. And let's be honest, the more times you fail and fuck the recipe up and you learn what doesn't work, the easier it's going to become. So make sure when you're using a recipe, you're not thinking that the recipe has to be this way. It has to be perfect. That being said, with baking, it's different. For those out there who like to work with pastry, you need to work with a recipe. Okay, those ratios are exact down to the gram, right? Down to the weight. You have to have baked recipes exactly as you find them. It's very, very difficult to freestyle with baking recipes. I'm not going to say you can't do it. I'm just going to say that it's going to be less forgiving than when you cook. When you cook, a lot of the time, it's going to be easy to just freestyle things after a certain amount of experience. And that's basically it. Cook without a recipe. Okay, number 4, work clean. So we talked about some food safe practices earlier. Let's just talk about cleaning and how that can make you a better cook. So make sure that you clean as you go. We had a saying in the kitchen, and anyone who's been in a kitchen knows this saying, and that's if you got time to lean, you got time to clean. Meaning, if you're not cooking, if it's not busy and your prep's done, you should be cleaning something, okay? Keep yourself clean, like keep your person clean. I had a bad habit. I remember back when I used to work in pubs, I would take my dirty knife. Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold. I'd have a dirty knife and I'd wipe it on my apron, okay, because it was convenient. And then I remember when I went into a professional kitchen, I took this habit with me, and the chef de partie was there, and he's like, "Dude, why are you so fucking dirty? Like, what's wrong with you? You're a slob." And I was like, "Oh yeah, why do I do that? That is so stupid of me." And then I never did it again. Then from that day on, I realized like, oh, when I go out and speak with the front of the house, or if I have to go talk to a guest, I'm going to look like a complete chump if I've got smears all over my white apron. And then ever since that happened, I really started taking how I looked as a cook seriously. It's almost like you want to look like you're clean all the time, even though it's very rare that you're clean in the kitchen, If you splatter something on you and then you have to go talk to a guest, it doesn't really look the greatest, right? If you have to carve a roast beef for a banquet function and you have a giant spill on you or your apron's all dirty, it doesn't look good. So keep yourself clean. And also clean as you go. So when I'm prepping things, I always want to make sure that I have nice organized mise en place. I want to make sure that my counter space is always wiped clean. I could share a funny story actually. Back when I was doing my apprenticeship at VCC, Vancouver Community College, I remember I was invited because I was the top in my class. I was invited to do a year-end competition for it was like a black box competition, right? And for those of you who don't know what a black box competition is where they basically give you a couple of ingredients and you have to, on the fly, make a couple of dishes, usually like a 3-course meal using these ingredients. Very stressful, very difficult, not easy to do. You really have to be like a good cook to do this, okay? And like, I was game for it. So I practiced and I did, this is going to be my A game. This is going to be a recipe that I could pull out if I get, a fruit, for example, in my black box. I could have this dessert recipe or these recipes kind of ready to go if needed. Okay, so I worked really hard on it. And then the day of the competition comes, and I remember I had my food going, everything's going good, and it's stressful as fuck. Like, cooking competitions are not fun. They're not like jiu-jitsu competitions, in my opinion. They're a lot of work for no pay and a lot of stress. And you don't even get physical exercise as a benefit out of it. So for me, cooking competitions was not really a thing that I enjoyed doing, but I have done a few of them. And I'm cooking, and then I remember like I thought I was being efficient. I had a lot of utensils out. Okay, I had them sort of ready for me whenever I needed it. And I remember when they announced the winner, and I was like, oh, it's going to be me. And then they announced some other some chick who I didn't know. And I was like, fuck, I didn't even get like considered to be the winner. I thought I killed it. Like, what the hell? And then I had one of the guys who was a cooking instructor who I looked up to a lot. He was one of the judges. He came up to me and he's like, man, your station was so dirty. Like, that's why you didn't win, is because your station was dirty. And I'm like, dirty? What do you mean? I had all my utensils out ready to, I had interpreted having, knives and like utensils ready to go. To me, it seemed like I was ready. It seemed like I had prepared my workstation for whatever I needed, but to other people watching, the station looked cluttered and not kept. And that cost me points, which led to me also losing the competition. So I was like, fuck. Like that was a learning experience for me. I perceived something as being organized and being, convenient. Other people looked at it and considered it cluttered and dirty. So make sure you clean as you go. That being said, I think what's really important is just keeping your counters clear. That's what I learned from that. And if you see something that you spilled, or you're a little bit of an ingredient has now scattered on the counter, just give it a quick wipe. Make sure your station looks so clean that if someone judging a cooking competition was walking by, they'd be like, oh, that person works clean. That's kind of the standard that I go to now. And even when I cook at home, it follows me there. Okay, avoid cross-contamination. So we discussed the hierarchy of foods when we're storing things in a cooler. Raw food goes below cooked, ready-to-eat foods, I should say. Ready-to-eat foods above food that needs to be cooked, okay? But what we also want to think about is cross-contamination. So I don't want to take chicken breast that's been marinating in a container, go put it on the grill, and then when it comes off the grill, put it back into that container with the raw juices of that chicken. That's going to be a recipe for foodborne illness. Or if I'm mixing different proteins that are raw into the same vessel. This is just a classic example of cross-contamination. It's a big no-no. Should always be using clean utensils and vessels, okay? Like if I'm turning chicken breasts that I'm cooking on a grill and then using those same pair of tongs to mix a salad or some kind of ready-to-eat food. It's a big no-no, okay? Keep your food storage area as clean as possible, by the way. So things like pantries and coolers and things like that, I recommend once every couple of months at the minimum, take your food items out of the fridge and sort of just wipe down the counter. If you go to your food storage area, keep it organized. If there's a spill on the ground or flour scattered on the ground, like just sweep it up. Keep things clean and make that a good habit. Okay, number 3, try to improve results and learn from mistakes. So just like in Jiu Jitsu, we go into a competition and we didn't get the result we wanted. We kind of royally fucked up the competition. We shit the bed and we lost. You got to ask yourself, why did that happen? Where was there a breakdown in the method and why did that happen? If you fucked up, we should always be self-analyzing and being critical of ourselves and asking ourselves, where did we go wrong? Okay. Or if I burn something, okay. Oddly enough, that will create an emotional arousal in your mind that you failed. And I can still remember times when I fucked up and it's helped me not do those things again. It's kind of like when I spoke with Kit Dale about using his game-based approach, or it's very similar to the ecological approach. You let the student fail, and when they fail, they get that emotional arousal and they kind of almost get a photographic memory that, oh, that's when I fucked up. Let's not make that mistake again. So that I can recall multiple times when I've curdled sauces, I've burnt roasts, I've cut things in a really unorganized manner, or a really untechnical manner, and I look back and I'm like, honestly, it still keeps me up at night thinking of some of the mistakes that I made in the culinary career that I used to have. So it's important to remember those mistakes. Don't ignore them, because ignoring those mistakes will prevent you from learning in the future how to be better. And jiu-jitsu is the exact same way, right? Sometimes you lose a competition by an advantage. Why did that happen? Well, I lost my grips at one point, and my partner or my opponent managed to flank my hip line, and I recovered my guard, but then he got an advantage. He ended up winning because of that. Things like that, right? Make sure that you have, let me just continue with that thought. Then you will know, okay, I didn't have the grip. That led to him being able to pass, but I recovered, which led to him getting a score on the board. So really the issue is with my gripping and with my off balancing, right? And so we can determine how we can create a solution just by being self-critical, even though it might not be the most fun thing to look back on something that was kind of a failure. In the long run, there's growth to be had when you fuck something up, okay? In jiu-jitsu and in cooking. All right. Like I said, reflect after every banquet or party. I do this any dinner party I have, anytime that I would be working, I would always think about it on the train ride home because I would live about an hour away from where I would have to work. It was a ridiculous commute. And I would think to myself like, okay, even if the party was perfectly executed, I would think to myself like, okay, what could I have done better? What could I have done better? And what were the good things that we did? What were the bad things that we did? This is how you should always be thinking. And even after jiu-jitsu practice, even if you're not a competitor, after your practice, think like this. What were some good things that I did? And what were some things that I think I could do better? Be critical of yourself. Let's also talk about BEOs, okay? BEOs, banquet event orders. This is just a form that is basically your plan for your party. Okay, so whenever we would get BEOs, I've worked in restaurants on the line, and I've worked in restaurants back in the banquet area. I really like banquet work, working for parties of hundreds or even thousands of people. What a BEO is it tells you what the name of the group is, maybe a brief description on the group. Maybe it's a soccer team or a rugby team, or maybe they are, I don't know, they're Japanese businessmen and whatever. It tells you the amount of people coming in. It tells you potential allergies. It tells you the time of the party. It tells you all the menu items that need to be done. It tells you any specifics of the party. It is your cheat sheet to know everything about what needs to be done about that party. Okay. And I do this at home too. If I was going to have like a dinner party, I would write everything down. And then from there, I would start building a timeline. Okay, the dinner is going to be at 6 p.m. That means I got to get my potatoes in the oven no later than 5. And even that's pushing it, okay? Like in culinary arts, in the hotels, we would try and have the food done a half an hour before the party was done, just so that the servers, who are largely incompetent, would be able to take the food out and put it in place, and they would have that little buffer time to work. The quality of the food suffers slightly, but in the end, it runs smoother as an operation. So it's important to understand that when you need 10 items up all at the same time, that you have a game plan and you have a timeline and you look at it beforehand and ask yourself, okay, am I going to be able to make the potatoes come up at the same time that I'm going to be carving meat? Do I have enough people around that can help me do all of these jobs before said time? This is when BEOs come in handy, okay? And like I said, BEOs also often will describe, allergies and special needs and things like that within your party. Okay. These next two, number 2 and number 1, are probably the most important hints that anyone can take to becoming a better cook right away. Okay, so the number 2, be a black belt with your leftovers. Learn how to use leftovers. Why is this important? Well, if you are in a culinary arts, a professional kitchen, product utilization is good kitchen management. If you can't utilize old product and it ends up getting thrown away, basically your management team sucks. So learning how to use food that has been previously cooked in another dish is super, super valuable because you save money. Essentially, you're getting to use the food again and make money off of it again. Now, you might think to yourself like, well, that's kind of gross. I hate leftovers. That's fair. Not all leftovers are good. However, some of your favorite foods likely were developed through the necessity of the use of leftovers, okay? Soups, shepherd's pie, stews, certain sauces, certain salads. There's so many things that have come from the necessity to use up leftovers. If you can become efficient with using leftovers, you're going to save a lot of money, and you're going to be able to, have meals for days off of one meal, essentially. So, some examples, like if you have leftover pasta that you cooked, okay, you could easily turn that into a pasta salad. If you have leftover proteins cooked, how are you going to use that again? You could use it for soups. You could use it for sandwiches, things like that. Omelets even. You can, there's so many things where you can use leftover garnishes in other foods, and just really thinking about how you can utilize product is incredibly important as a chef because, like I said, you will save so much money. And I actually love leftovers when I cook steaks. Usually, like anyone who watches my Instagram knows that I'll cook like 4 steaks at a time, right? And that's because I want leftovers. I want to be able to come home the next day and there's cooked steak for me and I just got to slice it and eat it, right? Or heat it up a little bit and now you don't have to cook that meal that night, right? It's just more efficient for me rather than cooking steaks every night. I like to have a little bit of leftovers. Okay, number 1, this is the most important, my number 1 tip to becoming a better cook. Learn how to balance your palate. What is a palate? Okay. The different taste buds that you have on your tongue can perceive different tastes. Okay. These are sweet, sour, salt, bitter, savoriness. The savoriness oftenly referred to as umami. So things like Worcestershire sauce, some might even consider things like Maggi, which is a Asian flavored ingredient, miso, things like that, mushrooms. These have a savory quality to them. So being able to look at your palate and take whatever you're cooking and balance it through these tastes is incredibly valuable. Sometimes you could have the best ingredients, the best ratio of spices, but if you don't put enough salt into that item, it's going to come out tasting bland and not really appealing at all. Okay, so oddly enough, when you're cooking a soup, you might not think, oh, it needs acid, but adding something like lemon juice or vinegar to a soup can really heighten the flavors and balance the palate. When I was first in culinary arts, this is one of the most important skills that they emphasized. Balance your palate. Learn when enough salt is enough salt. Learn when something needs acid or when something needs sweetness to enhance the dish, and also develop the skill to be able to correct something if it is too salty or if it is too sweet. How can we sort of balance it back? So for an example, if I'm making a soup and it's too salty, one of the better ways to fix this is to add more liquid or to add a starch that can now absorb the salt and make the salt a little bit more dull. If something is too sour, you can add some sweetness. It will be sweet and sour, but if you add some sweetness and, again, add volume, add a bit more liquid, you could potentially balance that dish and make it very, very, and sort of save it. This is hard to do in baking because in baking, once your ingredients are mixed and it's baked, it's done. If it either turns out or it doesn't turn out. Whereas if I'm cooking a stew or something like that and I go and I cook it and I taste it, I'm like, I added way too much salt. Okay, there is ways to fix it. There is things you can do to fix it. And again, I just recommend ask yourself when you're cooking something, is there enough sweet? Is there enough sour? Is there enough salt? Is it bitter? Bitter is one that is kind of underutilized, I would say. I think most people don't really like the taste of bitter on a day-to-day basis, but there are certain items that I really, really enjoy bitter on, and it can enhance food for sure. Even something like coffee or chocolate or red wine has a bitter quality to it that is I find very, very enjoyable. But that being said, I really love salty and I love sweet. And a great book that I would recommend for balancing your palate and learning how different ingredients work with each other or don't work with each other is a book called Culinary Artistry. That book is a very well-known book in the culinary arts profession. Most professional cooks who are serious about cooking have that book, I would say. It just goes on and tells you, like these, if you're trying to cook for these types of cuisines, like these nationalities, these are the ingredients that are indigenous to these cooking. You will find these ingredients in this ethnicity of cooking. These flavor profiles go well with these flavor profiles, but they don't go well with these flavor profiles. So somebody has taken a book and sort of systemized how ingredients work well with each other, what flavor profiles work well with each other, and given you kind of like a basic blueprint as to what ingredients can work when you're trying to come up with a certain cuisine. Very, very useful book for the aspiring chef. I really, really recommend Culinary Artistry. I think there's a sequel to it. I believe it's called The Flavor Bible, but I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I have opened any book that has to do with culinary arts. Nowadays, I'll be honest, my cooking ability is pretty limited to cooking for myself and for my family. I spent a lot of time in the culinary arts profession, about 15 years. And in the end, it turned out to be arguably a bit of a waste of time. And for me, leaving the culinary industry for jiu-jitsu was so valuable for my lifestyle. Nowadays, I'm making more money running a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academy than I ever could cooking. And the realization that I had when I, got into my my early to mid 30s was that, hey, this profession is not going to provide for me the way that I want later on in life. And so I left. And I think a lot of people who are in that profession with me have come to that realization. I only know a few people who still are in the culinary arts industry. Most of them got the fuck out of there because it's very, very unforgiving. But that being said, when you're a teenager or in your 20s, it is a fun job for sure. And I definitely learned a lot of system-based tactics towards problem solving through the culinary arts industry. I learned about hard work. I learned about, attention to detail and working with people, interacting with different people. There's a lot of great skills that I did get from them. It did make me, it really did help me become who I am today when it comes to the business world. But that being said, it ended up being a waste of time. But still, cooking tremendous food for people that you love, it is a special thing. And especially when you have people over for dinner, if the food was, excellent, you're doing more than just filling their stomachs. You are filling their hearts. You really are giving them memories through food. A lot of my favorite memories are associated with things like food and music and flavors. And so we do have a relationship with food that is very, very important as human beings. And I guess in that way, I don't regret going into the culinary arts, but it was a little bit of a waste of time. All right, you guys, maybe there are professional cooks out there who are listening to this. I don't know. Probably unlikely. And for those of you who just wanted to tune into the show to hear me talk about jiu-jitsu, I apologize because I just went off on cooking today. But if you do have any other tips about how you can become a better cook, I'd love to hear what you guys say. Leave it in the comments if there's any things that you think that I left out. And I'd be happy to read those comments. I really, really appreciate it. And also, guys, that's basically all that I have for you today. So if you want to support the show, please like, share, subscribe, leave comments in the comments section. I will leave in the show notes where you can support the show. You can leave a donation to my PayPal, which is in the bottom, or you can subscribe to the On Guard Online Academy and get access to my weekly content. We now have not just all of our lessons that I do at the gym, but also now we have a new section, narrated rolling footage. And this rolling footage is not just free rolling. It also has task-focused games where I narrate specific positions. So I'm just adding to that every week as much as I can. And I hope you guys enjoy the content, and I hope you guys enjoy the show. And remember, even though we kind of had that hiccup with the name change, the show must go on. I'm still going to keep putting out content for you guys, and I'm going to be rebranding the show. And you guys know what the new name is. As long as it's okay with JT Torres, I'd like to call this show the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. And I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Again, you can support me by checking the links in the bottom. Other than that, I'm going to say peace out and good cooking to all of you. Remember, the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu Podcast is everything you need to know about jiu-jitsu. Take care, you guys. Bye-bye.